My name is Donna, Donna Lemere, Lemere.
Okay. And what year were you born in and where were you born?
Oh my gosh, I was born in 1943 and very fortunate to have been born in Santa Barbara at Cottage Hospital.
Wow, that's pretty neat.
A
So,
real true native.
okay. And what other cities have you lived in? I guess,
I
yeah.
have never lived anywhere except Santa Barbara and Carpinteria.
Wow, that's something.
Yeah, it's either good or bad. I'm not sure which. I think I'm fortunate.
Well, I guess you never really had a desire to live anywhere else because you like where you're living.
Never had a desire, never really had an opportunity, settled in where I was and did a lot of traveling, saw a lot of areas and places that it might have been nice to live, but always stayed here.
Okay, I'm getting myself organized here. Um, what jobs have you had in your
Not a
life?
lot of jobs. I had a couple little part-time jobs when I was in high school. When I was in high school, I worked at Jostens, which was up on the hill in Summerland. And I actually met a lot of Carpinteria people then, interestingly enough. And then when I was out of high school, I went into the banking and I ended up staying with a savings and loan for 24 years in Santa Barbara. And then I came to work with my husband in his insurance office in Carpinteria. And I was there until we retired.
And
So not
and
a lot of jobs.
okay. And your husband was Fred Lemire, right?
My husband was Fred Lemire, and he is a Carpinteria native, Carpinteria High School graduate, ended up being gone in the military and living other places, but came back and settled in Carpinteria in the late 50s and ended up buying Carpinteria Insurance Agency, one of the oldest businesses in Carpinteria at the time. He was there for 40 years.
Wow.
I was there for the last 15 of those years.
And was he also a Carpendrian of the Year?
He was way back in 1980,
Yeah, and
20
what
years before me.
do you know what he was honored for as what was
Oh my gosh, dozens of things. He was very active in the community, as you need to be if you're a local business person. And he was involved, past president of Boosters Club and Boys Club and Lions Club. And he was on Recreation Commission for the city, the first one they had, responsible for lighting the Memorial Field, many things. He was a 64-year member, a life member of Carpinteria Lions Club,
wow.
which very proud of that, very dedicated to that. He was on the Carpinteria Water Board for 20 years, an elected position. He was on a appointed position, Carpinteria Cemetery Board for 30 years, I think. He kept very busy.
Okay, well, and did you help him with a number of these things?
I did help because he never became very computer literate. It kind of came to him in a later age, and he was not real comfortable with it. So I did most of his computer work for him, typing things and writing and whatever he needed to do, that kind of thing. So I was kind of familiar with everything he was doing from that.
That's fun, and I guess you were able to give your input where you thought was needed.
I did that too.
Good. And I know you've volunteered quite a bit. And were you also a Carpendrian of the Year?
I was honored, very humbling experience for Carpenter of the Year for 1999.
Huh.
And I was very proud. It was a very nice thing. You
What
never feel you deserve that kind of recognition.
and what were some of the things you were honored for?
Variety of things, never anything as much as Fred did, but I became known, I think, for working on the annual Community Awards banquet, organizing that, and still working on that. Enjoy doing that. It's a big job every year. I drive for help in Carpinteria. I donated blood all my life. Somebody thought that was important, I think. I was involved in several other organizations and just typical volunteer work you do, particularly when you are in business in a small town, I think. You volunteer to do things.
Um, the Community Awards Banquet, it's been under the auspices of a few different organizations.
Actually, it was always under the auspices of the Carpinteria Valley Chamber of Commerce. And this year coming up will be the 66th event. They started it, I believe, in 1958, naming a man of the year. And excuse me, I have
Sure.
a cold.
No problem.
And
Sorry.
it was called the Man of the Year event. And that went on for a number of years and was held at various locations, always under the auspices of the chamber. And then it changed to the Carpinterian of the Year because they had a woman named Carpinterian of the Year. So it had to change the name of the event. And then from there, it became the Community Awards Banquet because it became much broader and so many more people were honored. It was always under the chamber until about 3 years ago when the chamber merged with the South Coast Chamber of Commerce in Goleta and Santa Barbara. And they kind of did it for a couple years, but those of us who'd been around forever decided we could do a better job. So we formed a new organization called the Carpinteria Community Association. And we basically, our main function at this point is to put on the Community Awards Banquet every year. And we were able to do that last year, kind of the way we used to, and it was very successful and really a wonderful event. And we hope we can keep doing that. And we want to start doing other things for the community, the business community, as time goes on.
How would you describe the business community in Carpinteria? Do a number of the businesses struggle and some are more successful than others? And
Certainly some are more successful than others. And, it always has been, there were some very old businesses in town. The lumberyard is still here and has been for a long time. The Palms was one of the long-term businesses, as was Carpinteria Insurance Agency when we had it. And of course, when we sold it, this was 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we hoped it would stay in Carpinteria, but the people we sold it to had other thoughts, so it didn't. Um, I think businesses, small businesses struggle, retail businesses, I'm sure. Restaurants seem to do well in Carpinteria. We seem to have more and more restaurants and they seem to be busy. And I hope the business community can do well. I think the chamber, when it was here, our chamber was a benefit to the businesses because they were able to certainly refer them to other people that came to town and things like that. Excuse me, I'm so sorry.
yeah, no problem.
Um,
Sorry to get you when you have a cold, but
no,
you're
it's
doing
that
it.
time of year.
Okay.
But I think I hope the businesses do well, and our intent as the Carpinteria Community Association is to try to do some things to promote business and maybe do some of the events and things that have been done previously. So we have our thinking caps on for sure.
Well, what type of changes have you seen in Carpinteria over the years?
Oh my goodness, I've lived here since the early 1960s. So you see a lot of changes in people, different people here than used to be here. We miss all the older people that I can remember being here and seeing when they were downtown walking around and that sort of thing.
Are there fewer longtime Carpinterians, more people,
Sure.
more
Yeah,
people
there are
moving?
because they're dying off on us. It's people get older and we bring new younger people to town and that's good. I think you need that in a community to keep the community alive. I think our community is still alive and well and doing well. It's
I,
busy.
I think some longtime Carpinterians and the kids of them are not necessarily able to afford living here since it's so much more expensive than it used to be.
That's very true. That's very true. I've been fortunate to have some of my family still here. All my grandchildren, when they were born, were living here when they were growing up, which was wonderful. Now they're kind of spreading out. Um, it is expensive. It is very difficult
Do you
for
see
young people.
do you see any more or less tourists coming here? And are there more people that come from Santa Barbara and Ventura for dinner here?
I think our restaurants do well in bringing people from Santa Barbara. I hear people in Santa Barbara say that they come to Carpinteria for dinner. We have nice restaurants to come to, and I think that's good.
Do you think the tourists are any different in nature or in quantity?
Seems like there's more tourists, certainly in the summertime. The state park is a wonderful facility and it's busy all the time, particularly in the summer. It's, you know, jam-packed with people and they do come into town and shop and eat. And I think that's a good thing. Take advantage of the state park people for sure. I think we have more rentals for beach rentals and things like that for people, which is good also, but it's expensive.
Hmm. Um, do you have any thoughts of any lessons you've learned in life, particularly that you can pass on to others, either family members or younger people trying to do well
Goodness.
in business or get married?
I always believed in the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. That's always been something that I've kind of had in the back of my mind. I think that's one of the best things you can do is try to help other people and treat people the way you would like to be treated. I'm very fortunate that I've had my family, which is pretty big now with our children and grandchildren and great grandchildren. And we have had an opportunity to help raise our grandchildren because they were here. I think that's a wonderful bonus in life.
Hmm.
Now they're kind of spreading out, but communications are easy and with Zoom, and transportation is pretty easy. So we get to see our grandchildren pretty often.
Nice. Um, do you want to say the names of your family members, or are there too many, or?
Yeah, Fred and I, between us, had four children. He had two boys, I had two girls, and we joined family and ended up living um, less than a mile from each other, our families. So we're back and forth all the time. The boys are Scott and Todd, and the girls are Denise and Deanna. And we unfortunately lost Scott this past year to a brain cancer, which was a very devastating thing. And his brother Todd suffers from multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer. So we've had rather bad fortune in that. Um, one of the girls lives in Florida, and the other is now living in the house that she grew up in with Fred and I, which is an interesting. She was able to come back to Carpinteria. We took advantage of the city of Carpinteria's ADU building last year, which they made available, which was wonderful. They provided the plans and the permits, and you just needed to have the property, and our lot on our home was big enough. So we built an ADU, and I'm living in that. And my daughter and her husband are living in the house, which makes it nice for everybody.
Nice.
Yeah, our grandchildren some of them are here. Can't tell you by count, maybe five. We have 10 grandchildren
Hmm.
and four great grandchildren with a fifth one on the way.
Wow.
So they're
Excellent.
spread out between Florida and Idaho and Washington.
Huh. Um, tell me about food. What have you normally eaten for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and what are some of your favorite foods?
It's interesting because I lost my husband. You probably know that in August. So I'm learning to eat differently. It's really different being one person by yourself. When we were in a normal life, we ate a light breakfast and usually ate lunch and oftentimes went out to lunch in Carpinteria.
What would be a light breakfast?
Cereal and toast, maybe.
Coffee?
Not decaf coffee. Never drink caffeine. Um, Dinner time, I cooked most of the time, and I like to cook, but simple. Chicken and fish, lots of fish, lots of nice fresh fish in this area, Santa Barbara particularly. And now at Zucker's in Carpinteria has a nice fish market.
Okay. And
Love beef, love a steak anytime.
do you have some favorite restaurants in town?
We love Gianfranco's. We went to Gianfranco's the night they opened, had their grand opening for the entering into Carpinteria, and I was involved with the chamber at the time, and they invited the chamber to come, and so we had the first meal they ever served in Gianfranco's. We were there, and we've always become very fond of Gio and Anna and Frank, and think they do a wonderful job. We go went. I'm still in the we mode, but I haven't been eating out too much, but we used to go to never not the Palms usually. Interestingly enough, it was a little lively in our older years, but just nice. IHOP for breakfast was a special, and they're still around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see. What are some of the memorable news events in your lifetime? And then and a separate question will be, what are memorable events in your life? But let's start off with news events.
I was 20 years old, I think, when JFK was assassinated, and that's just a vivid memory in my mind. Where I was and how I heard about it, and that was really a big news event. Um,
I guess there hadn't been many assassinations before that, right?
none in my lifetime, of course, but no, there were a couple, I think, besides Lincoln. So that was really something. Of course, 9/11, and by that time we were retired and traveling, and um, we were in the Grand Canyon when that happened.
Hmm.
And one of the park rangers came by and told us about it and said, you probably ought to go someplace away from here because the bridges are here, the water's here near the Grand Canyon, of course. And they, at that point, had no idea what else was going to happen. So
For those that might listen to this in the future, how did 9/11 change things in our way of life?
changed our way of life very much in security, in travel, in fear, I think, um, in some prejudices. I think there were a lot of things that changed because of that. I can remember telling when we left where we were in a camper and drove to the mountains where our grandchildren were living at the time. And I can remember telling my teenage grandchildren, your life will never be the same. It won't be because of this. Just,
And security is such a big deal now, getting on planes and all. And
it's eased off some. It's a little easier than it was for a while, but yes, it still is, and it should be. I think they need to be careful.
how about in your own life? Any particular memorable events?
I think you always have memorable events that affect you personally, like illnesses. I was very young. I was 39 years old and I had a heart attack and I was very sick. And that kind of thing kind of sets you back and makes you think. I always said I'm living on borrowed time. I recovered and I live a normal life and have been fortunate. But I think that does. I think certainly losing a spouse is life altering, even though in my case it's very recent. Um, it does affect your whole life. You losing children, those kind of things are affecting. But then what's affected positively is having grandchildren. I think that's one of the most wonderful things we've ever experienced. Um, is having that ability to have the grandchildren, and particularly because they lived here when they were growing up. And we got to participate very much in their lives and therefore very close to them now.
Hmm.
All 10 of them.
Wow, that's great. Um, how has technology changed in your lifetime? What are some of the new things?
Totally. Absolutely, totally. I worked in the banking industry when computers, quote unquote, were just coming into being. We were just getting away from using calculators, and this would have been in the 60s. And we actually had an in-house one of those big computer systems that's in a air-conditioned room in the basement, locked so nobody can get in. And we would run that computer and make our bank run. That was a big new thing, and lots of learning with that, lots of training with that. Um, coming in when I was in the insurance business into the personal computer um, time was totally another big change where you actually have computers at your desk and you can look at company information and that sort of thing. Computers at home, I don't know how people exist without them. Um, it's just part of life. It's just, you have to, and the communication part of it is wonderful. Christmas a couple of days ago, we had a Zoom with all of our children all over the country. And we had everybody on one big screen in the house here. And everybody else was here, and everybody else was someplace in Florida or Idaho or Washington. And it was wonderful because we were all together. That kind of communication is indescribable.
And I guess other changes are cell phones.
Yeah, cell phones are an interesting thing. I've yet to understand how everybody that you see everywhere has a cell phone and can afford a cell phone. I don't know how that works, but the poor people who are out there who are begging for food or whatever have a cell phone. Everybody has a cell phone. I guess it's just part of life, right? Beyond me. But you have to have it. It's this thing about kids with their age and how young does a kid have to have a cell phone? And I'm looking at my grandchildren who are maybe one who's 11, and they would not think about not having that kid have a phone. And they have newer phones than I do. They've got all iPhone 16s. I don't even have that. It's just part of life, part of the life. And the kids, the interesting thing I noticed with my 15-year-old great grandson, he has an Apple Pay and he has money on his cell phone. So he can go buy food or whatever, things like that, and pay for it. He keeps his fund in there.
Nice. Um, what would you say you're good at compared to the average person?
Probably nothing. I'm average. I'm
Wow.
organized. I'm very
You're
organized, and I think
okay.
that's important. And that's why I've been able to do things successfully, like the community awards banquet. Plus, my friends are organized that I work with. That helps too. Um, I think I'm a good thinker most of the time. I'm a good planner. I plan things and stay with whatever I've planned. I'm not spasmodic about things.
Are you a good friend?
I'm a good friend. I have a few good friends, and I consider myself a good friend. Yes, I'm a good grandmother. My grandchildren will tell you that.
Nice. And I guess it helps to be a good friend and grandmother if you go by the golden rule.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
okay. Um, let's see. Do you want to tell me any favorite book, movie, candy, or anything? Well, how about book and movie?
I suppose one of my favorite movies of all time, like a lot of people, a lot of women maybe, is Dirty Dancing. Love that movie. Could watch it over and over and over. I watch I watch TV now. I watch series on television, and I'll get into one. And one of my granddaughters the other day said, "Grandma, have you watched Prison Break?" And I said, "No, I've never even heard of Prison Break." She said, "You need to watch Prison Break. It's on Netflix." So I looked at it right away, and then the next day when I saw her, I told her. She laughed and she said, "What'd you think?" And I said, "Yeah, it's pretty catching." So my grandchildren tell me shows that I should watch, and usually they're right on.
Are there any other series that you've watched?
I'm just finishing The Sopranos, which was big years ago. I never watched it, and I'm just finishing that. Um, I don't know. I just whatever somebody tells me is good, I usually will watch, and I get into them. I do finish something. I don't usually start them and quit.
Oh, huh.
Try to stay with them. I'm
Just
struggling to finish The Sopranos, but I'm going
okay.
to do it.
Are you much of a reader?
I am a reader. I've always been a reader.
Any
I read
favorite authors?
mostly fiction. I like romance novels, but I like spy and um, police dramas and books. Lots of Patterson books. I like those. Um, I I I read on my iPad
Hmm.
now. I used to go to the library. Now my library is on my iPad, and I can check out library books, and I do that constantly. So I always have a book going.
What's the value of being a reader, would you say?
I believe what you learn. even if you read, my husband used to criticize me for only reading fiction. He said, you don't learn anything when you just read fiction. And I said, that's not true. You can learn a lot when you just read fiction. He read nonfiction, and he felt like he was learning more than I was learning. But and enjoyment, relaxation. Um, I
What
get
what
into stories and I can read them again. I can read one and then I can pick it up and read it, a few years later and still enjoy it again if it was something I liked.
that's one of the advantages I find about being an older person, that if I pick up a book I read 10 years ago, I don't remember it very well. So
Very true. I've been reading over the years Stuart Wood's books. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he has a series that he writes about different people, and um, most of them take place in New York City, and then there's a lot of travel involved for these people, these lawyers, and they're just interesting. They come up, it just fascinates me how people can write that way and come up with continual stories, but I can read them again and again, and I still enjoy them.
and what would you say you learned from fiction?
You learn about a lot in the world because fiction books, they travel. There's a lot of travels, a lot of activities, and many fiction authors are writing what is not fiction to them. So they're travel to these places all over the world, and they see them and they tell about them in their stories. And then if you have the opportunity to visit these places in other parts of the world, which I have, you realize that you know about this place because you read it about it in a book you were reading, and that book very well could have been fiction.
And I guess you also learn about interpersonal relations, how
Oh,
things affect
absolutely.
people, and all
Yes,
types of things.
sure, sure.
That's a good point you make. Um, are there any particular accomplishments you're proud of?
Oh, I think my family, the fact that we were able to have a combined family, and everybody loved everybody else and got along fine and still does. And the fact that we were able to be involved with raising our grandchildren. Um, I'm going to Idaho next week to help take care of my great grandchildren um, for probably the month of January. So just the things that we've done with our family, I think we've been very fortunate. We actually, there was a program in carpentry many years ago called the American Field Service Program, and they supported bringing students here from other countries. And Fred and I, when our older boys were in college and girls were in high school, um, applied for that. Somebody in carpentry asked us to do that. I think Sarah and Eddie Macias, and we applied, and we were matched up with. They said matched up with computers. I'm not sure they had. Well, they did. It was in the 80s. Matched us up with a girl from Holland. Um, Marika was her name, and she came and lived with us for a year and went to Carpenter High School as a senior. She was actually 18, but she was here to work on her English, and she became part of our family. She became a sister to our children. Um, it was like we raised her like she was our own. And to this day, in fact, she was just here. We still have a close relationship as she does with all of our children. It's just a wonderful family of her own. She had nice parents. Her parents came to visit us and hosted us in their homes in Holland and Switzerland, and just a great experience. It was a nice program that they had.
I guess some people might be reluctant to do that in fear of they'll get somebody they don't care for or is difficult.
And that does happen. When Marika came with us, there were two students that year, and the other one was a little boy from Jordan. And the family that had him, um, I think they wanted a babysitter, and so they didn't. He didn't have the kind of relationship that we had with Marika, and Marika took him under her wing and tried to help him, but he did not have a successful year with the family, and it was really very sad. And I'm sure that does happen. We were we were just perfectly matched. It was very fortunate, very fortunate.
It also probably helps if you're somewhat easygoing and understanding to get along with strangers, huh?
Yeah, you do. But you have to accept the fact that when they come into your home, they're going to be part of your family. And when Marika came, she had her own room and had her own things, and became part of the family, it helps because you have other teenagers that are there with her. She particularly liked the boys because she liked boys, and she liked to be able, they were both at the University of Southern California, and she liked to be able to go down there and visit the university level and the people there. She had fun with that. She and her husband came this last August when Fred passed away. They came for some time to be with us, which was really nice.
Nice. Do you have any photos or memorabilia that you can share?
You had mentioned that, so I grabbed one photo,
I'm curious to see how that works on Zoom, being able to
which
see it.
is tells it all, and that's our family.
Oh yeah, hold it
And that
still.
was, yeah,
Yeah, if you just hold it still. Oh, neat. Okay.
that
Uh,
was a couple years ago,
and is
three,
that
4 years
Fred in
ago,
the
but it
center?
shows, yeah, there's a lot of us.
Yeah.
There's usually when we're all together, I think there's 24 of us. We're not often all together anymore.
Two more questions. If you could choose how you're remembered after you're gone, how would you like to be remembered?
Oh my gosh. I guess just as a nice person and a good friend and certainly a good grandmother,
Nice.
local carpentarian. I'm proud of the fact that I've always only lived here. I thank my family, my parents constantly for settling in Santa Barbara and giving us the opportunity to grow up in this area. Fred and I did a lot of traveling, and I never found any place that I would want to be other than here.
Well, very good. And the last question is there anything else you'd like to say?
I think I've said plenty.
You have said a lot, but I'd like to throw that in case you were just waiting for me to ask a certain question.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate your sharing with me today, and I can share this with others.
Certainly.
Well, good.
As
And
I said to you in the beginning, I don't have much of a story to tell, so um,
well,
I
but
haven't bored you, I hope.
no, not at all. You're a lovely woman, and you've done great service to our community. And so, thanks so much for this interview.
Thank you, Larry. Enjoyed
Okay.
it very much.
Okay. See you around town.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Okay.